Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great time listening to the great lineup of industry leaders we have here at WIT-ACE Spark. My name is Preethi, and I'm joined today by two lovely guests to discuss how we're using social innovation to drive sustainability, especially during these times of the pandemic and even beyond. With not wasting much time, I'd like to introduce my first guest today, who is Jayati. Jayati has worked for more than 20 years in org development, leadership development, and change management after her MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. For the past few years, her focus has been working with leadership teams to help their organizations and teams become more sustainable. She does so by helping them adopt practices that benefit the planet, people, and thereby the profits. She's also worked with social enterprises in their efforts to become more efficient and self-reliant. As the president of Sustainability Council, she is leading a team of experts in implementing on-ground change to make Delhi a sustainable city through actions on water, air pollution, and waste, which after reading, I do realize is quite a tough task. She runs an organization called Delhi Meri Jaan, which generates awareness through nature immersions to enable citizens to take action towards creating a more sustainable Delhi. I'm sure Jayati will learn a little bit more about that when we speak with you. She also teaches business sustainability and management courses in leading B schools and is presently co-authoring a book on emerging models of sustainability for Springer International. Welcome, Jayati. I mean, it's a really great to have you here. I think the topic kind of really just is the experience that you have, and we really look forward to hearing more from you today.
Thank you, Prateek.
Okay. Our next guest who is joining us from Bangalore today is Preethi Thoppil. Preethi is a senior director at Nasdaq. She currently leads the software engineering for the trading and risk product engineering teams for Nasdaq in Bangalore. She has been in product development for around 22 years, primarily in the financial domain. Prior to Nasdaq, she was a technical architect at Infosys for the Pinnacle banking solution. In her role, she has conceptualized and spearheaded several key technology products and process initiatives across multiple teams. Preethi has played a key role in organization-wide transformation programs, leading and guiding multiple teams in new ways of working with alignment with business strategies and obviously the company's vision. She's an active member of the Nasdaq CSR group, or the Corporate Social Responsibility Group, and the Purpose Initiative that champions growth and prosperity. So welcome, Preethi. Excited to have you here as well, and would love to know more about what organizations and corporates can do about sustainability in the long run. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Prateek. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. So without wasting much time, I think I'll pose my first question to Jayati, to just kind of get a little bit of understanding about what we are discussing here today, what we are talking about. So Jayati, we know that, we have to discuss this right now. The problem is here and now, and there is, tremendous pressure we have on the resources right now, more so in India, right, because of our population and everything, and rest, obviously with the rest of the world as well. We have our, systemic problems of poverty, lack of education, healthcare, infrastructure, overpopulation. I mean, I can go on with that. We know those problems exist, but there is also this added responsibility these days of having, more sustainable growth or more responsible growth, because everyone is moving towards it, especially the developed world. So where do you think we are, on our journey as a country when it comes to sustainability? Do our citizens, more so our leaders, do they realize the gravity of the situation? Is it just a good to discuss topic like, the Paris Agreement? Yes, we'll do that. You're keeping those targets, but is it something that we need to take up more seriously and have more actions on the ground? I just want to build some context around this. So would love to have your views on this.
Sure. That's a great question, Prateek. I'll try and answer that in 3 levels. So starting with the country, at the country level, we have been doing things and we have been taking strides in making our moving towards a more sustainable path of growing. So you know that we are the first country in the world to have mandated CSR. So
Yeah.
that's quite a step that we've taken. Niti Aayog for the last 2 years have been coming out with an SDG report, so which captures how each state is growing in terms of meeting the sustainable development goals, and as a country how are we doing on sustainable development goals, which is a really good step, because the moment you measure and track, progress can be made. As you mentioned, the Paris Agreement, we aren't one of the most polluting countries in the world, but we voluntarily agreed to the commitments in the Paris Agreement, and especially in terms of renewable energy, we have made ambitious commitments of 450 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. Solar is a focus area. We're doing making strides again, moving forward toward in that. There are certain policy changes with regards to metering, which sometimes makes the solar progress a little slow, but that's for another discussion. Slowly moving towards the where it kind of where the country and the corporate world kind of meld is the SEBI's guideline this year, which says that organizations, the top 1,000 organizations listed on SEBI as per market capitalization, need to mandatorily report on business responsibility and sustainability starting financial year 2023. Now that's a huge step, because as I said, that we're pushing for reporting, and once that starts happening, we hope that more things will happen. Moving towards the corporate side, that's the next level that I'd like to spend a little time on. Organizations like a Mahindra or an ITC or any of the other HUL manufacturing organizations have traditionally reported on sustainability because of the nature of their work. They have certain disclosure norms, they have certain compliance norms, they are large emitters of carbon and
Mhm.
large users of resources, so they have done sustainability reporting. But in overall, the reporting on sustainability amongst Indian companies has been low. If you look at a global standard like GRI, very few
Mhm.
companies in India report on that. But reporting is one thing, but I'd like to share what I experience when I go into organizations.
Mhm.
The task of sustainability, or ESG as we say, still remains in the realm of finance. It's an accounting tool, and it stays there. The discussions are not happening in during quarterly meetings. We are not tracking people and planet along with profits when we are making our business plans. So it's really not ingrained into the organization's business model, and that's a
Mhm.
huge gap. The last level that I talk about is the individual, which is the
Yeah.
consumer. The individual consumer in India, unfortunately, appears to be lesser oriented towards responsible products and services as compared to Europe. I'm doing a comparison with another place.
Yeah.
It probably is the economics of it. We may not be in a position to pay a premium for a more socially or environmentally responsible product or service. That could be it. But I think there's also a lot to be said about awareness of the individual consumer.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's a huge gap there.
So what I hear from you is that one at the government level, there is a a policy or a framework which you think is there or is being there is work being done in terms of instituting that framework where you can measure, or the government is trying to obviously come up with new things. What I do hear from you on the other side is that at a corporate level or at an individual level, more needs to be done, and which is why I ask you that, is it just a good to do thing, or that people are just doing it out of goodwill, that well, everyone is talking about it, so let me put my hand up and be a good company or a good citizen that way.
Yeah.
But what I really was interested, when I was reading about this, was that there are a lot of countries which you mentioned in Europe, which who have done that switch, who have moved from a good to do thing to actually kind of instituting it in their daily lives, and companies are doing it without any pressure of reporting and things like that. So do you think we will, somewhere get there, or is it just, we are in a very nascent stage right now? So, and the reason why I ask this is because, yes, on a per capita basis, we are really low on our energy consumption. But overall, as a country, because of our population, we are amongst the largest emitters. Coal, again, being one of our primary resources for electricity consumption. So all these things are there together. So I think there is a need to move over to making this as a part of everyday life. Are we anywhere close to it?
We are, so there is hope. There is hope. The reason being, as organizations, so this year, for example, not just this year, over the last few years, the international investors have come down very strongly, right? That they will not be investing unless there is there is ESG compliance. And similarly, Indian financial sector is also obviously going to has started moving towards that direction. So the moment we have pressure, one of the pressures which works very, very well is financial pressure, right? So if that is there, then that's one which is already started. Our international consumer base, international markets, especially for the B2B segment industries, we will have to move towards a more compliant or more responsible value chain if we want to continue having a business outside the country. It's the B2C business, which is where the customer, the individual customer like you and I are there, where I see still a huge gap. And that's the area where we need to start really working on creating awareness. And that's how it's going to seep up. It's going to be from bottom up, really, where the organizations start realizing that it's not a good to do thing, it's a must to do thing, because my consumer's not going to buy this product if it is not responsibly sourced or responsibly produced. They're not going to buy it, so I better start putting it into my business plan.
So I'll come to that, when I'll come back to you on that, on how, individuals or what responsibilities we have, because it's very easy to pin everything on organizations, on governments and things like that. But I mean, somewhere the responsibility also lies in us, and we'll come back to that. But for the moment, I'll switch my attention to Preethi, and I wanted to, ask you from an organizational standpoint that, more and more organizations, Preethi, are coming up and saying that we are turning net zero by 2030, 2035, whatever their targets are, right? Which is a good thing. So it is, to the fact that it is moving to a place where it's just not a good to do thing, it's a mandatory thing, and organizations are doing that. But do you think, with the kind of resources large organizations have, is it just worthwhile to first, just say that, we just look inside and say that, okay, we'll be doing this within our walls? Or is there a larger social responsibility that organizations have beyond their remit and beyond the business that they do, wherein they can make an impact in this field? All in all, what I'm trying to ask is, what are the role of especially large organizations who, Jayati mentioned, are huge emitters in some cases? What role can they play in towards sustainability and innovation?
Yeah. So absolutely, you said it right. More and more organizations are now looking at ESG compliance and reporting on carbon emissions, water usage, and they understand the value of these resources. But at the same time, as Jayati also mentioned, this is also important for institutional investors to make investment decisions these days, as SEBI had enforced it. So when you look at the corporate sustainability, it starts with companies' value system and also extends to a principle-based approach to doing business. For instance, if you look at the UN Global Compact for sustainability, they talk about 10 guiding principles for sustainability, which spans across various areas of human rights, labor rights, environment, and anti-corruption. Now, and as an organization, like for instance, Nasdaq, who is a member of UN Global Compact, what we can do is to incorporate these guiding principles into the business, and thereby providing and also sustaining, or rather, I would put it in a slightly different way, where by incorporating this, we are establishing our basic responsibilities to the people and planet, and we are also setting the stage for a long-term success. And when you look at these, big organizations, which has a broader and more strategic plan for sustainability, they would not just focus on driving innovation across their enterprise, which could be even transformation of key processes, but they will also influence what their customers want and how their suppliers operate. we can leverage the power of our organization through various ways of advocacy, research, and various philanthropic programs, so that you create an ecosystem of sustainability. And the real outcome comes in there, right? When we collaborate and co-create solutions that meets the urgent demands of urgent issues of ESG, I would say. In this context, what I would also say is that the main challenge that we face in this transition journey, as I say, would be to look at innovation not just from that economic point of view, but also from an environmental and the societal impact that you can make. And this is where the topic of social innovation also comes into picture, right? Social innovation focuses on these aspects, the people aspect, the societal impact that we make in the world that we live in. And organization can definitely do a lot to advocate this, to the practice sustainability, to advocate the sustainability practices across various organizations, and also to educate the businesses and general public about creating a sustainable capital. And when we look at the social innovation, I think there are several social innovations in the world today. I mean, there can be digital social innovations, like I think Wikipedia, which all of us are aware of. And the other, obviously, social innovations which cut across various, sectors. And social innovations definitely play a crucial role in the sustainability. And this is something that all organizations already understand. And if you look at Jayati's point of ingraining this into the people, the employees, people being more aware of their social responsibilities, that is where organizations can again play a huge role. For instance, social innovation definitely mobilizes a person's creativity, right? It promotes innovation with that social cause as the primary agenda. So if you look at, say, for instance, Nasdaq, as a global exchange, Nasdaq is definitely committed to, sustainability practices. And it also, looks at these three factors of people, planet, and profit by, advocating volunteerism, by mentoring for the social entrepreneurs, any entrepreneurs, social as well as generic entrepreneurs, and also with other philanthropic programs. So, for instance, Nasdaq has set up something called an entrepreneurial center that focuses on supporting global entrepreneurs across the world. And the primary focus is to support women and underrepresented communities, entrepreneurships coming from these communities. And with this, what we have found is that employees are very actively engaged when they work with these entrepreneurs, lending their skills and their time to promote their entrepreneurship, as well as learning in turn in that process. It's a two-way process.
Yeah.
And just to add on to that, it's also about how we, as Jayati mentioned, we have CSR initiatives are mandatory in all the organizations. Now, it's about how we take these CSR responsibilities and how engage our employees with these CSR responsibilities. That defines the success of an organization, and that defines how organizations can make an impact in the world that they live in. Like, for instance, if you look at, let me take the example of Nasdaq again. So Nasdaq Corporate Social Responsibility Program, we work with the local charities and NGOs who look into the various basic aspects of infrastructure, healthcare, education for the rural communities. And this is an eye-opener for many employees who work in these organizations. Yeah. They get to see the real challenges faced by the people, and they understand, firsthand, and they understand this is where my innovation has to go in, not just a technology improvement. Right, so that's key, and that's important, and that's something which Nasdaq also actively promotes within our employee system. And recently, we had very eye-opening experience with the Right to Live, an organization that works with the rural villages. So we had recently installed a RO water purifier, water plant in a village, with a remote village, who didn't have access to clean drinking water. You know, the villagers there had to go to walk several miles to go to a source of water to get, that is pure drinking water, which we take it for granted, right? It's available on our taps.
I'm smiling because that is a typical rural picture which everyone has in their mind, someone going and fetching water, and it's just, we're all used to it somehow because we see it so often, which is not good.
Exactly. So that experience has been eye-opening, and people got to know that, okay, innovations that we are talking about has to really impact these people. This is how we can make an impact, and organizations definitely understand that and promote this kind of an engagement with employees.
I think what I got from you was that, and now when I'm kind of reflecting back, some of the organizations that I worked with and I know closely, I think the path bearers in this field are organizations who, first of all, it's obviously that they do their own business in a sustainable way, right? That's a given now. But they also kind of take a step further, as you mentioned, for Nasdaq, to impact things beyond their remit of work. And the example which you said about helping out small businesses and innovations, I can think of pretty much all the organizations that I've worked with who have a incubation center or a startup help unit kind of, or ventures kind of a unit, which kind of helps startups who are working in this space, pretty much all of them. And I think more and more organizations are getting onto that bandwagon where they are trying to impact things beyond their remit of business, which is incredible. So thank you, Preethi. I'll actually move to Jayati now to just kind of, again, you have on the ground experience, you work in this sector for quite, extensively. So I just wanted to get from you more stories about, or more examples about the country. Like, we are a country that, we know that we have suboptimal resources. I mean, when I was reading about this, came across the phrase called necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's a long English form of the word jugaad. Okay, so that's how we'll probably kind of put it there. But I mean, in the crisis that we saw, like, we're kind of partially still going through in terms of COVID, we saw our citizens do so much. Like, there was just so much happening on the ground, which you could see in terms of people coming together, gathering resources, and innovating in the best way possible to help out. How do you think in the current ecosystem, more from policy point of view, also from where we are, from an economic standpoint, can we promote social innovations in a more sustainable way? Is it, just the government's responsibility to make policies? Obviously it is. I mean, everything stops with them. So it is their responsibility. But I wanted to know what more, to the previous part you mentioned, as individuals, as organizations, as society, as community, we can do to help in that factor, because the change has to come from within, and everyone has to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we should really be proud of the term jugaad. I think we've lended it to the international business lexicon. They use it now extensively. Completely agree with you. The pandemic brought out a spate of social innovations, and especially the second wave, which was just in a couple of weeks, we saw innovations like my favorite one is the auto ambulance that we saw in Delhi. And it was not a high priced innovation. It was just auto drivers making their autos available to transport patients, and community came together, gave them the required oxygen cylinder, and so on. But it was such a fantastic, and so many other innovations just came up, because the moment there is life involved, there is like loss of life is imminent, innovations just start happening at a rapid pace, and from all over, like from the grassroots level to a CEO of an organization. Everybody came together to create logistical apps, for easier delivery of things. We all know this. We've heard the stories. So I think the key is the moment we are able to see there is life at risk, we innovate. Should the I mean, so what's the answer then? That how do we have a ecosystem which encourages social innovation? Luckily, there again, going back to finance, that there are incubators, there is investment coming into these kind of funding these kind of innovations. Government has a few schemes to fund, and in fact, what I really appreciate about what's happening is at the school level or at the education level, where there are a sufficient number of contests, and I've seen this firsthand, contests and projects being run for students where they are encouraged to innovate. And some of them are government run. The school pedagogy kind of has lent itself to it. So there is a lot of focus on that. It wasn't there when I was in school. So for sure, there is a push towards
Yeah.
think out of the box. Think of a solution. There are design thinking workshops happening in school. I hadn't heard the word design thinking till I went to B school, right? So
Yeah.
there is a focus at that level to get children and the youth to think beyond. And the younger generation, which is who I work with a lot in my colleges,
Mhm.
are extremely keen to take on social innovations. They
Mhm.
do it, as I keep saying, that it's a function of the country's economy. I mean, they are probably looking at a slightly higher level of Maslow's hierarchy for satisfaction today.
Mhm.
They're able to do that. They can afford to do
Mhm.
that. 2 generations back, we may not have been able to do that. Today they are able to. So there is innovation happening at that level. But again, it comes down, the responsibility, if I were to just answer that point, is on each of us to be able to connect the dots. Like Preeti
Mhm.
mentioned, how you see how this thing that I'm making, how does it finally lead, what is the outcome of this, and how does
Mhm.
it hit the individual? So we need to be able to, a simple example of that, and I'll stop there, is being able to see how our consumption pattern impacts biodiversity, and how biodiversity loss leads to zoonotics, which is what we're reeling from right now. So it's like, to be able to do these connections is when innovation starts. At present, we look at today, we're not able to
Mhm.
join those dots so much. So our innovations are all restricted to right now: disaster, cyclone, pandemic. That's when we have a lot of innovations happening.
It's more reactive in nature
Up,
rather than,
the exact
yeah,
word.
yeah,
Absolutely. That's the word.
rather
It's
than
reactive.
proactive. But I mean, you mentioned all these things, and I was just thinking about what Preeti mentioned. Like, and you mentioned about schools and all. I mean, I have people who are kind of finishing school right now. I kind of interact with them, and most of them are in the big cities. So the point is that yes, a lot of kids sitting in a Delhi or a Mumbai, having chatting with friends in a Househouse Village or a Bandra will probably have
Yeah.
a lot of things to say about this. We'll probably move it, but that's India. There is also, as you so call it in the terms, there is also a Bharat which kind of
Yeah.
goes beyond these cities,
Yeah.
and there is, you kind of, how do we connect that gap? You're talking about connecting the dots. I think the innovation really is when it starts happening in the cities. Let's say, I mean, social innovation can happen in villages also. It happens more in villages, to be
Yes.
honest.
Yes.
But how do we really kind of penetrate that boundary between India and Bharat so
Yeah.
that we kind of are able to make a wider impact, because that will be really important. We have to cover 1.4 billion people. It can't just be pocketed
Yeah.
innovations.
Just can't be Bandra and Househouse Village.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the good thing, again, I'm trying to give a really positive spin on things. The film Padman, you know,
Hmm.
so where it is people from a smaller town. I'm not even talking about the invention which Padman focuses on, but the event where he went, which was an
Hmm.
IIT Delhi sponsored innovation event, and where the winner was really Mitti Cool again, which came
Hmm.
from, the very grassroots level innovation. There is encouragement of that thanks to some of these kind of contests. Simply to put it very simply, contests which run. But this is a very simplistic view. I
Hmm.
don't have an answer to how do we really encourage innovation at that level. But in this, again, going back to the field of education, probably because I'm associated with it, there are very, very, very progressive thinking schools for the rural population. There is the barefoot school in Rajasthan. Then there are other schools. There are schools in the villages for the rural population. Shiv Nadar runs some schools in
Yeah.
UP, and they're very, very focused on innovation. They're very focused. Actually, the pedagogy in general has moved towards, let's think out of the box.
Okay.
Think. The word think is become common.
I hope we see the results in some years, because our generation is done. So we did what we could with in
I
terms of
think so.
doing things.
I
Yeah,
think things
but
look good.
there's more coming up. Okay, Preeti, just coming back to you. I think one of the things that was I've read a lot about it. WIT has spoken extensively about it in their in the articles that they've published. Is the fact that this pandemic somehow was more I would say more brutal on women for a lot of reasons. I can think of at least 4 or 5 women who were working in corporates who had to drop out because the responsibility at home was just too much. I I can't even begin to imagine how things would be in smaller cities or in households which are small. We're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about increased responsibility, kids and things like that. So my question to you was more in terms of, when we're talking about livelihoods, saving livelihoods, we're talking about different things that kind of promote innovation. Women are an integral part when it comes to workforce, right? More in the informal sector, a little less in the formal sector, which is obviously a concern. But do you think this pandemic has set them back? Is the damage already done? Is it reversible? I just wanted to know your views on where you think about the larger ecosystem around this.
I think that's a good question. There are, I mean, the statistics are alarming actually. So
Yeah.
if you look at, the progress that country has made in terms of, though it has been a slow progress, but whatever progress has been made in terms of bringing that gender equality has been set back a couple of years by this COVID. And when it comes to the reason, this is primarily because women are the primary caregivers in the home, right?
Yeah.
And when during COVID, even with work from home, if you look at formal sectors and any options given, women have more to do, more unpaid, more unpaid work to do than men. And this has definitely caused more mental stress, more issues in terms of balancing the work and the home life, and this has definitely prompted women to opt out of the work. Now, when you consider the other kind of jobs, if you look at the healthcare workers or the domestic staff, the cleaners, all of them
Yeah.
have lost their job during COVID. I mean, health workers, obviously, they are in the front line and they are the most impacted with COVID. They are more prone to the infections. And when you look at the domestic help, most of the household had stopped asking domestic help to come in, right? And even the childcare facilities have been closed. So all of this have contributed to women being taking up a lot more than what they were doing earlier, and which definitely has caused a bit of a reversal, regression in the progress that we made. But we can do a lot to make sure that that is addressed and we come back on track. And this is where organizations, government, and even individuals play a huge role. So if you look at corporates, as I mentioned, most of the times the women in the home has to do the office work and the other daily chores in the home, and also take care of children, elders. Now, how can this be eased out by corporate and governments? It's a good question to ask, right? So the only way I would say is to kind of do more of gender sensitization for male employees. So they share the workload of female, and they kind of help and support the woman in the house to in the work. So that can ensure that the stress and the pressure is not felt so much by the women. Now, this gender sensitization has to be done by the government programs. Corporates can do it, and as an individual, you can do it too, right? So these are simple things that anybody can do to make sure that the work is balanced across every member in the family. And the second thing what corporates can do is to make sure that they give flexible work timings. You don't place a stringent measures around the amount of time the person works in, look at more at the outcome and give more flexibilities in terms of caregiver leave or caregiver benefits. It could be leave, it could be additional economic support. That's one way to make sure that people do not opt out of the work. And when it comes to, I'm mixing government and the corporate the choices.
Solutions at the end of the day, yeah.
Yeah, it is solutions. So if you look at government, I think they need to they need to provide the income or whatever economic packages that they are talking about. There are a lot of economic packages that government has come up with. I could say a lot of them. But are they really reaching the women in the family, or are they just going into the family? Now, are we sure that women are benefited by that? So this is where a little more gender specific programs have to be constituted by government, instead of just looking at supporting a village or a family with whatever economic packages that government has come up with. It has to also be more proactive in terms of addressing whether it reaches the right hand, and that can definitely help women to be more empowered to be in the work. Some of the other points that I can think of is also about, if you come to organizations, the senior women leaders or male employees can actually work with women employees to make sure that they are mentored. They can just be a good listener to the problems that they face, and which will help them understand and appreciate what needs to be done to solve their problems, which is definitely possible. I don't think there is anything impossible in whatever. These are not very high finance problems, right? So which can be easily solved if you just give a lending ear or listen to them. And again, in this context, I think in the context of listening to their problems, we need to also look at some of the mental and physical wellness programs that you can introduce for the employees in the formal sector. No, but obviously this doesn't apply to the informal sector. Now, there what we need is to have more social protection, as you rightly said, Prateek. So violence has increased. And why has violence increased? The entire family is together and all of them are facing the same kind of pressures. Male, female, everyone faces pressure. But usually when the male faces some pressure, females usually bear the brunt of that. So what can be done in terms of social protections and healthcare, helplines for women to kind of get some help during these tough times? And those are some of the other areas that I can think of.
Yeah, I think, I'm just kind of again reflecting to what you're saying. I mean, again, the mental health part or the psychological support part, I know for a fact that so many of these organizations are overburdened now to an extent that even their professionals need help now because they've been listening to so much of it. We can look back and say that, yes, the past 2 to 3 months, more in the last 2 to 3 months, less in the last 1 year, I would say, have been really tough on everyone in a lot of ways. And a lot of the times when we are trying to find solutions, it's actually some of the problems really do not have solutions, right? We should be okay to accept the fact that some of these problems will die their own death when things get back to normal. These are not problems that are specific to any part of the community or any country as such. Some of these things we have seen across the world, right? Women workforce dropping out, the primary caregiving part you mentioned has affected all the countries. And it's not just specific to India. Yes, the impact is a little more in India because of the fact that, we have a big informal sector. It kind of impacts more. But yes, I think rightly put, some of the solutions which you mentioned, I think are really good ones which you can implement. Okay, I think we are kind of coming towards the end. And before we do that, I really want to put both of you on the spot. So Preethi, since we are speaking, I would first put you on the spot and ask you, we're talking about social innovations, and there are so many in India. When I was thinking of the examples, which are the ones which you like, or the ones which you would like to share in terms of having made an impact, and the ones which you think that, they really were something that, ticked all the boxes?
That's a tough question because there are so many innovations around the world. And there are innovations in different categories as well.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that, something which I felt connected, or which I kind of, instead of saying like is a bit of a different word, which I feel that, it's applied or made a huge impact for India or any country for that matter, is the introduction of solar panels, using that renewable solar energy to power the villages where you cannot get the electricity line, and to also make sure that hospitals are run, and even an airport, a complete airport being powered by solar energy. If you know the Cochin International Airport.
Cochin International Airport.
It's completely powered by solar panels. And in addition to that, they have also made sure that the solar panels can be used for rainwater harvesting. So that they have floating solar panels, which provide the water required for all the water purposes in that airport, as well as the nearby places. So I think, and that if you look at the statistics as well, I think India has made huge stride in that solar energy utilization, and it has obviously impacted a lot of villages and all areas of India, I would say.
Yeah, so I think Jayati mentioned that in the numbers when she mentioned 450 gigawatts, right? That's so that's a quantifiable number. So great, Jayati, I'll come to you now. And you see a lot of this. Which one's your favorite?
So I'll be really quick. We don't have much time left. I completely agree with Preethi that solar is one great one. Similar to this, in a way, something which came up actually as part of the pandemic and it kind of boomed is the organic food market, and the organic food, which includes traditional, locally grown food, addresses. So as you asked, something which ticks all the boxes, and this one for me ticks all the boxes because not only is it good for the soil, for the planet, quite obviously it is, enables biodiversity replenishment, something that we desperately need if we want to stop further pandemics. It actually engages women at the grassroots level, and what happens is there are a lot of micro enterprises which have come up, which kind of do that last mile linkage, the market linkages for small farmers, which was till now that the demand is really high, and now that the focus is on health, it is finding traction. It was not able to till people were indifferent to a vegetable from the vendor was just good enough. But it's today when that's a great thing that I'm excited about.
Hey. Thank you so much. I hope the listeners have taken away a lot. I think I personally have taken away a few things from this one in terms of how to be personally more responsible about how I'm impacting the planet around, and watch out for more innovations around and see how I can support them. I think we do realize a lot of innovation is happening around, but if we keep our eyes and ears open, I think there is lots that we can do as individuals to support them. In both in our individual capacity and with organizations we are. So thank you so much, Jayati and Preethi. It was a pleasure interacting with you.
Pleasure.
I hope you had a great time, because I had an amazing time. And we hope all the listeners too, while you continue to listen to other speakers around WiT-ACE Spark. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Thank
you.